nice article in the Managing Madrid blog. Wonderful lads that do a great job there. And it's worth reading about that man there. Karim Benzema needs to rest, and the numbers reveal why.
Times ended up almost looking like a 6-3-1. Some very good writing about that on the Managing Madrid website. First rate podcast as well. Of course, Fede Valverde was a huge part of the equation.
Hey everyone, welcome to this pre-episode of Madrid Mornings. We will be reviewing and discussing the catastrophic 5-2 loss against Atlético de Madrid at the Metropolitano this Saturday. The first true challenge of the season, and you don't need me to tell you that the team did not pass this test. So plenty of concerning issues. We will discuss at least most of them during this episode, hoping that you at least get some kind of therapy from this, because as I already mentioned, this has been a very catastrophic and concerning and worrying derby at the Metropolitano against an Atletico team who were not particularly dangerous or brilliant during their own first few games of the season. Yet obviously they always show up against Real Madrid at their own stadium. So Real Madrid should have expected challenge, a true and tough challenge. I'm not even sure that they actually did expect that kind of challenge, at least most of the players, because as we will be discussing later, only a handful of players actually played with the intensity and the courage and the character needed to face that kind of atmosphere and that kind of intensity from Atlético de Madrid. Please excuse and forgive my voice. I don't know why, but I keep struggling with this cold I got like 3 weeks ago. But we will do our best to keep this show and this episode going. So, on one hand, it's very positive that Real Madrid were able to come back from that early Atletico goal. Real Madrid found themselves. Well, let's talk about the lineup first. I think Xabi Alonso went for a questionable decision by starting Bellingham here and going away from what was working for Real Madrid in those previous weeks. I feel like Real Madrid had established a few connections and a few plays with their backbone players, which were Huijsen, Güler, and Mbappe in the past, at least on offense. Tchouaméni was one of those core players, but mostly on defense. And by introducing Bellingham in the lineup and deploying Güler on the right wing, Alonso decided to again go away from one of those partnerships which was working really well, which was Huijsen and Güler, and then Güler and Mbappe. It's pretty clear that Bellingham is going to be a starter for this team, right? I mean, that's obvious. I think the most questionable thing about this lineup and about this particular decision from Alonso is that I think Bellingham is the one who needs to play, quote unquote, on offense, while Arda should be the midfielder. If you have been paying attention to this podcast and to other shows from us, you're probably familiar with the fact that I believe Bellingham is not a pure centered midfielder for a 4-3-3 formation. I think Bellingham's nature, Bellingham's tendency is that of an attacker. Whereas Güler, I think, has the link-up play, the patience, and the creativity to distribute from the midfield, even though I have my own questions about his ability to defend as a central midfielder against quality opposition, elite opposition, if you will. Bellingham doesn't have that question mark about his defensive intensity, physicality, and overall defensive instincts against elite opposition. But I think he has that tendency and that nature inside him to become an attacker. I think Bellingham was quite poor in this one, understandably so. First game in 2 months, not an easy one. But in terms of the team's tactical shape, I think I would prioritize, if I were Alonso, Güler as a central midfielder, and then it gets tricky. I realize this because how do you fit Bellingham and Vinicius and Mbappe up front? It's kind of shaky because of not one of those three players likes to play on the right. Could you play with a diamond, Bellingham behind Vinicius and Mbappe, with Vinicius having that kind of freedom to play on the left? Sure, but the team would then lack some width, in my opinion. So it gets tricky to fit all Vinicius, Mbappe, and Bellingham up front. Whereas, Arda is more comfortable on the right. So on paper, it should make sense. But Bellingham's tendency to attack and Arda's brilliant link-up play and ability to distribute us from the midfield makes it more obvious to me that the team would benefit from playing Arda as a central midfielder and then do your best trying to fit Vinicius, Mbappe, and Bellingham on offense. That's one point that I think was wrong in the lineup. Alonso went away from this, and I think it cost the team. What actually hurt the team the most, in my opinion, was the very obvious and very apparent lack of character and personality within this roster. It's easy to play against mediocre / small opposition and show this character, but you could see the team and the players kind of afraid and overwhelmed by the intensity and the physicality and the atmosphere from the Metropolitano. And players like Carreras were pretty atrocious. Definitely, obviously, his worst performance as a Real Madrid player. Huijsen as well. I said the other day on Mailbag, I was growing kind of concerned about Huijsen's pure defensive ability. And last night, even though he is like, I think 1 meter and 96 centimeters tall, showed no ability to defend crosses whatsoever. But I will get to that, Assas. Thank you for joining, by the way. As I was saying, Huijsen's the defensive structure was very, very underwhelming. Carreras, again, atrocious performance. Huijsen, terrible performance as well. Asensio, when he came in, looked underwhelmed as well. Underwhelming. And you could only rescue from this game, in my opinion, Arda with his goal and assist, Mbappe with his goal, and Vinicius with his assist to Güler. I could also rescue, even though he was pretty controlled and in check against Atletico's defense. I think the most important point and the most concerning, if you will, aspect of this game is, as Asas Hussain mentioned on his comment here in the chat, the Valverde and Tchouaméni partnership in midfield. Valverde has I'm not going to mince words here. I think it's been that bad. I think Valverde has been pretty terrible this season so far. I'm not sure he fits well into what Alonso is trying to build structurally. I think there's some very obvious overlap between him and Tchouaméni as midfielders. I know this is controversial. Valverde is a very beloved player in Madrid's fan base. But I think right now, as of right now, Valverde could be even dropped and go to the bench. I think the Tchouaméni and Camavinga partnership would be way better than the Tchouaméni and Valverde partnership. And we know that Tchouaméni is a key player for Alonso, and Tchouaméni this has been pretty good so far this season, apart from that early goal from Atletico last night when he did not defend Charlotte the way he needed to be defended. Not sorry. I don't even remember, bro, anymore. Was it the first goal? Atletico were exploiting Madrid's aerial defense all game long. So you know what I'm talking about. He defended poorly on one of those crosses, and it cost Real Madrid a goal. That's it. I don't even remember what goal anymore. Oh, it was actually the first goal, the Lenormand's goal. That was Simeone, Tchouaméni's man, and he did not. He actually allowed Lenormand to hit that ball and score. So yeah, well, Tchouaméni, I don't believe he deserves to be benched. I think he's done well in that role. I think he deserves the confidence. I think he's also perfect for that role as a libero when Real Madrid are trying to implement the three at the back and change the system. I think Tchouaméni is fine. Poor performance last night. Definitely not as poor as Valverde's. So I am worried about Valverde. I think he's obviously untouchable, Valverde, right? I mean, it would be very controversial for Alonso to go out of his way and bench Valverde for Camavinga. I know this. But this is something I think the team needs right now. I think Camavinga would offer different things as a passer, as a distributor, than Valverde right now has not been offering so far this season. So I am worried about the Tchouaméni and Valverde partnership in the midfield. On paper, this is obviously the midfield Alonso wants to and is trying to deploy and implement. Because again, it would be very controversial and very hard to drop Valverde from the starting lineup. But right now, I think he probably should not have a guaranteed spot on the starting lineup. And if he were to, that spot would probably be on the right on a 4-4-2 on the right wing. That would be my go-to choice at the moment. Plus, I also think that there's some overlap not only with Tchouaméni but also with Bellingham. Both Bellingham and Valverde are at their best when they charge forward and play kind of in that box-to-box role. But I honestly believe both of them kind of struggle controlling the tempo of the game, and it's not in their nature to do that. So, yeah, my most concerning point about last night is definitely the Valverde and Tchouaméni partnership in midfield. I am truly worried about whether or not this partnership in the midfield will be enough for Real Madrid to beat elite opposition this year. I'm seeing some comments on chat saying that Tchouaméni and Güler and Bellingham would be great in the midfield. I'm not entirely sure against elite opposition. That would obviously also allow to play Mastantuono on the right. I think that's a very reasonable formation and lineup against most of the opposition Real Madrid will be facing this year. But I kind of have my concerns about that midfield against the Atleticos, the Barcelonas, Liverpools, and you know what I'm talking about, against elite opposition. I would be kind of worried about that defensive cohesion and structure against elite opposition with just Tchouaméni as the only player with any sort of defensive instinct and defensive IQ in the lineup. I realize that Arda and Bellingham and Mastantuono even work really hard. But again, in terms of positional defense, I worry about that kind of midfield against elite opposition. Okay, so I think we should also be talking about the team's aerial defense. You could definitely feel and realize that Atletico were targeting this aspect from the early get-go. And this is something that concerns me as well. Because on paper, Militao, Tchouaméni, Huijsen should be good enough to defend this place, but they struggled a lot last night. Huijsen in particular. Huijsen looked pretty terrible in the air. That second Atletico goal from Sorloth, you have to expect your center back to defend that play efficiently, especially when he's, again, 1 meter 96 centimeters tall. As I briefly mentioned before, I am slightly worried about Huijsen's ability to defend against these elite opponents. I think he will be definitely and mostly fine. And he's obviously, he's obviously very young. He has the opportunity to keep developing as a player and improving in that aspect. So I'm not saying that his signing is going to be any kind of failure or anything like that. I mean, he has room for improvement, and he will become a much better defender over time for sure, with experience and knowledge of the game, and even some mentorship from the coaching staff and all that. So I'm not worried about his signing at all, and I'm not worried about Carreras either. But it's just a matter of right now. I think that's an obvious weakness that other elite and quality teams can exploit. Take a look at Manchester City, for instance. When they visit the Bernabeu in a few months, they will be able to exploit that kind of stuff. Barcelona as well, if they actually start Lewandowski, and I expect Flick to do that after the weakness Real Madrid showed against Atletico last night. Maybe in some other instances, Lewandowski would not start in El Clásico because he's obviously in his decline. And Ferran seems to have the edge over him in the rotation. But right now, considering the weakness Real Madrid showed on the air last night, I would start Lewandowski if I were Flick. And that concerns me a lot. Because, again, Huijsen struggled a lot in the air last night. Defending overall, but in the air specifically. So another worrying and concerning point for me about last night was the fact that I think Alonso did not stay true to his own self with the starting lineup. I'm not sure why. I'm pretty certain that Alonso will be regretting his lineup decision last night, saying, why did I go for this when on the back of my mind I would have wanted to go with something different. But this is a very Real Madrid politics around this club as well, man. It's time for us all to acknowledge and admit this. Politics actually rule this club. I don't think Bellingham should have started. I think the team had found their groove and momentum without him. And you had more manageable and easier games after this one to find that groove with Bellingham. I realize that Bellingham has to be a starter in this team. We all know this. But this wasn't the right game for Real Madrid to find that kind of momentum and form with Bellingham in the lineup. In the lineup, you had easier games coming up for you to experiment a little bit and make sure that the team finds the right chemistry with Bellingham in the lineup, but definitely not last night. So I think Alonso should have gone with the lineup that was working. I'm not even talking about Ceballos, who actually played really well against Levante, but just the classic Tchouaméni, Valverde, Güler, and then Mastantuono on the right. I would have gone with that lineup. I think obviously Bellingham was working really hard during the summer to be ready for this game in terms of his shoulder. And that, he probably sacrificed some stuff, but he shouldn't have started, man. It's just Real Madrid did not have the time to experiment and make sure that this lineup with Bellingham works against the elite opposition. So Alonso should have probably stayed true to his own self and start what actually worked in previous games. So hopefully this is a learning process for him, and he starts doing what he believes is the best thing for the team, instead of doing some and going for some political decisions in some other instances. Well, the next big challenge will be El Clásico. I mean, that's a bad thing, right? We have 1 month ahead of ourselves to kind of question whether or not Real Madrid still have learned from the Atletico loss. It's not like there's another big game in 10 days for Real Madrid to make a statement and prove themselves. We have to wait another month to see if Alonso has learned, if Valverde has improved, if Bellingham can actually fit with this midfield, if the Tchouaméni-Valverde midfield is going to work, if Carreras is going to have the right approach and the right mentality against elite opposition and crazy atmospheres, if Huijsen can actually be relied upon to defend against elite opponents. So that's a bad thing. We have to wait another month. On the other hand, the team has another month ahead of themselves to work hard and make sure that they improve in training so that they're ready to face Barcelona, because right now I don't think they are. And luckily, they do have the opportunity to build confidence back, because if Barca were waiting 10 days from now, I think the confidence blow that Real Madrid took last night, well, yesterday, will be kind of tough to overcome. I think the players are probably shaken right now after what happened on the field yesterday. So anyway, guys, I'm just going to take this super chat from BWR777. Ceballos should have started. I think he would have helped, to be honest, but it would have been, I think it would have been way easier for Alonso to start the trademark Gala 11 that he had been deploying so far this season, with Tchouaméni and Güler, Valverde, and then Mastantuono on the right. So we'll have to wait and see what happens in upcoming games. I expect Camavinga to be involved in some capacity. I think he was a bright spot off the bench. I think he has things to offer to this team with his profile and his dynamism and his versatility. I do have my concerns about his lack of consistency, because he's shown a very obvious lack of consistency when he's been given the chance to start games week in and week out. But I do think that the team would benefit from having a player like Camavinga in the starting lineup. I will be advocating for Camavinga to be a relevant player this year, because I think he has plenty of things to offer for the team and for what Xabi Alonso is trying to build. Anyway, thank you guys for tuning in to this free episode of Madrid Mornings. If you are interested in more Managing Madrid content, and Kian and Leah posted their post-game show yesterday immediately after the game. That's only for members, but you can check our Patreon to become members, and that will help us a lot, and you would obviously get access to plenty of more content. Right now we are going to offer you one free Madrid Mornings episode each month, and the rest of them will be only for members. But the post-game reaction is right there for you to see it. Kian and Leah, and I think Sam also offered you some really interesting thoughts. Sam obviously covered the game for us, by the way, at the stadium, so he definitely had some interesting thoughts about the game and what happened behind the scenes, maybe. So make sure to check it out and check and listen to that post-game show, because I think you will enjoy it. It was kind of therapeutic, and Kian also offered some very tactical and interesting thoughts about the game. Thank you guys for tuning in. See you next few shows, and stay tuned to our site for more Real Madrid coverage.